Kind of a shorter video today because I just really wanted to talk about hero identity in Deadlock. Now, what do I mean by hero identity? Basically, every character in the game is designed to fulfill a certain role, and their kit is designed to help them fulfill their role. However, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think when it comes to characters' personalities, backstories and interactions, Valve hasn't missed so far. In that regard, everyone is really well made. But I have a lot to say about their gameplay, since I am sure devs are far from having every character's playstyle finalized, and we have many fundamental changes coming. I also think it's worth mentioning that Deadlock doesn't really have defined roles for characters. It is true to a certain extent for other MOBAs, but if we look at Dota, they have positions 1 through 5, and you always want to pick a fitting hero for each position. In Deadlock, we don't really have anything like that, at least yet. Partially because the pro scene is not large and there are no big tournaments and prize pools outside of Deadlock Night Shift maybe. And usually those rules get established when there are a lot of top players figuring the game out. The lack of draft is also something you have to keep in mind. There is definitely an algorithm that kind of balances out team comps, but it is still pretty random. Despite all that, characters clearly have their own place in the game. We have tanky bruiser characters who are supposed to frontline for their team, pick characters who can find a kill for their team, late game hyper carries who destroy lobbies if they get ahead in souls, supports who provide healing and utility, etc. All that combined with all the different ways you can build your heroes and constant meta shifts sometimes leads to some characters changing their gameplay identity entirely. I actually want to start with one of the most discussed and one of the most controversial characters in Deadlock's entire history, Shiv. Shiv is a character who is broken on a fundamental level. However, he keeps maintaining below 50% win rate at every rank in the game, including high turnus. So how is that possible? To me, Shiv has one of the weirdest kits in the entire game, which is why I have no idea what his identity is even supposed to be, and I don't know what devs are thinking with this character. His first two abilities are the ones I enjoy the most: knives that deal bleed damage and can stack, and the dash that works as a movement ability and as a damage ability with Spirit Armor Shred. Knives can easily be countered with Dispel Magic, which is a good item to grab in almost any game, and dash is really only useful if you are fighting in tight spaces or if enemies just stack on top of each other. Both of those abilities can deal a lot of spirit damage, but they also have counterplay. I think any person who plays Shiv can agree that those abilities are the most fun part of his kit. The problem comes from three other things: his passive, his ultimate, and his movement with the right clicks. If you look at Shiv's first two abilities, you would think his role is supposed to be dashing through enemies and shredding their spirit, allowing his knives and his teammates to deal a lot more spirit damage. And if you don't use any crowd control or if you are out of position, Shiv will punish you for that. However, Shiv's passive ability makes it so part of the damage he takes is delayed. And then if you use this ability, you remove part of the damage you had to take, which makes him an insanely good frontliner who is hard to just quickly burst down. Then his ultimate provides execute, and recently they made it recastable even without putting any skill points into this ability, which means whenever you are teamfighting and you're against Shiv, your entire team is walking around with 20% less max HP essentially, and it becomes 30% less max HP when he maxes out this ability. On top of that, his ultimate provides a second passive ability, which is Rage. Rage amps all of your damage. It makes every single one of his abilities better by adding additional properties to them, and he also gets movement speed. And as if it was not enough, his right click, which is a powerful shot from his shotgun, has knockback, which can be used for a shit ton of movement attacks, like infinitely sliding around, jumping off the walls, or even reaching high ground more easily. So what we got is a character with insane spirit burst damage and shred, who also has sustained damage with knives, insane movement if you commit to learning some tags, but even if you don't, you cast his ult or dash to escape, crazy tanking capabilities, and the 30% HP execute that you can fucking chain. The character basically does everything and doesn't even need that many items to get online. Shiv doesn't have a clearly defined identity like a lot of other heroes, and since he is a skill check hero, his win rates stay low despite him being an objectively broken hero by design. But to be fair, he can be situationally bad into certain comps, especially against mobile characters, so he can definitely struggle sometimes, but it doesn't change how oppressive he is in most cases. If you ask me, I'd say get rid of bloodlighting completely. This ability needs to be reworked into something else. To me, Shiv is fun because of his movement and dashes plus knives combo. That's what makes him satisfying to play, but they keep nerfing his shotgun movement, which is the most interesting part of his kit to learn, instead of just getting rid of his insane tankiness. They might also have to nerf execute because this shit is kind of ridiculous. Recently, they tried changing his dash to being a melee damage attack, which was an interesting change in my opinion, however they didn't let us experiment with it for even 2 days. The change was reverted in 24 hours and I couldn't even play that day, so I didn't even form an opinion on this change. I suspect they were so quick about it because most Shiv players were screaming that the character was dead, even though I'm pretty sure melee damage dash might have been simply better, and I would honestly like to see what could happen with hybrid Shiv, but I guess we won't see that again. Speaking of a character who does way too much, what the fuck is Silver? No, like, seriously, who is this character meant to be? Were they making her with the intention of adding a tanky disruptor character who can do a lot when her ult is up? If that's the case, then I think they messed up some numbers, because why the fuck it's been 5 months and she's still solo carrying every fight? I agree, Silver is a character who requires skill when she's not in wolf form. Human form Silver is actually really cool and balanced for the most part. I think every single one of her skills is a skill shot, you have to hit that shit, and if you don't, you won't kill anybody. But until recently, her ult cooldown was 40 seconds, which means she had her form ready every single interaction. There was basically no downtime, and in her wolf form, she heals when she enters it. She has a movement ability, she gets crazy lifesteal with her 1, and she refreshes all abilities and extends her ult timer upon kills. The damage she deals is not reasonable considering how unkillable she is when she has her ult. Then they were like, okay guys, 40 seconds is kinda crazy, we will make it 70 instead. That felt better to play against, the punish window became more reasonable, but her ult form was still extremely strong and it is till this day. Recently, they increased cooldown of every ultimate in the game, which made Silver's wolf form cooldown go up to 80 seconds. And then, after everyone got their cooldowns increased, they make her ultimate go down to 60 seconds. So it's even better than pre-nerf. I have a question, is Silver supposed to be a frontline disruptor character? If yes, then why are her damage numbers so high, even after all the nerfs she has received? Till this day, it's one of the most confusing characters in the game for me. Another character who is really struggling to find his identity is Bebop. Just like Shiv, this character gets changed more times in a year than Deadlock's players take shower. Bebop has a very weird kit. His uppercut does melee damage, his bombs deal spirit damage and gain stacks, his hook is a big hero tool, and then his ultimate is a beam of spirit damage that locks him in place. It's honestly extremely hard to pinpoint what exactly devs want from this character. Bomb builds seems to be the preferred build by most Bebop players, but it is also one of the easiest playstyles to counter. You can dispel bombs, you can counterspell the explosion, many items in the game give spirit resist, and you also have to get up close as a huge ass robot with a giant hitbox who walks on the ground, whereas a character like Holiday just throws her barrels at you from the sky and deals just as much damage basically. Then, for a time, gun Bebop became meta. I don't think anybody was a fan of that, and devs quickly nerfed his gun damage, but till this day building gun seems to be the best way to play Bebop if you want to win on that character, even though to me it clearly doesn't seem to be the intended way. One of my most played characters is the Lash, and the moment I stopped playing him was when Gun Lash became meta. To me it was just not what the character is supposed to be, and devs seem to agree, because they nerfed his gun damage stacking and buffed spirit parts of his kit. Lash is clearly a spirit nuke character and they made sure to keep him that way. But Bebop is just too weird for them to balance, especially considering that it's a character with a hook, which is pretty much a Holiday lasso on a 12-second cooldown that you can cast twice in a row if you uppercut someone. It has counterplay for sure, but it is still an extremely strong part of his kit. So what do you do with Bebop? What's his identity supposed to be? Is he just a tanky big guy who is supposed to run at you and put bombs on your ass, cause that type of playstyle will never be viable for higher level play, and as more time goes on, more players will know how to counter it, which is not that fun, but I also don't think gun bebop is that fun, and I doubt that it is his intended playstyle. So I predict we will eventually see an entire overhaul of Bebop's kit. Let's actually talk about a character who has a very defined identity and is one of the best designed characters in the game in my opinion, and it's Venator. I don't think there is a more functional full gun character in Deadlock besides Venator. To start off, all of his abilities synergize with his gun. The only ability that deals spirit damage is his trap, which doesn't make a lot of sense by the way, but I think they just didn't want this ability to deal a lot of damage, so they made it scale with spirit items that you normally don't build on Venator, except maybe rapid recharge. But traps work great with any other ability he has, and they help you at shooting a target who just stands there immobilized. I also found it interesting that two gun items they released not too long ago before Venator came out, Recharging Rush and Ballistic Enchantment, synergize great with Venator's kit, so I'm almost 100% sure they made those items with him in mind, and they also ended up being some of the most fun items in the gun category. To me, Venator should be the blueprint for gun characters going forward, but I do think for a hyper carry who scales really well into the late game, his laning stage and early to mid game in general is too good. If you compare him to a character like Wraith, for example, she is just much weaker without her core items. Another archetype I want to talk about is flying characters, Vindicta and Grey Talon. We only have two flying characters basically, and I can't help but think that they feel outdated. The idea behind those characters' identity is that they can fly up in the sky and stay out of all the chaos happening on the ground. But in modern Deadlock it kind of just doesn't work.
Oh, look at me, I'm Vindicta, I'm gonna fly and shoot you from above.
Knockdown, hook, lasso, Apollo and Celeste flying around you like mosquitoes, Venator and Infernos beaming you down because you're the easiest target to shoot with no cover, Abrams Phantom striking your sorry ass. You would legit be better off playing on the ground. Vindicta is one of the OG characters who were added when the game just got available through invites. Back then, movement was much simpler, map geometry was different, and people also didn't know how to play around her flight. But now when people figured out the game, and after many new characters and movement changes, flying in the air with the speed of a fucking slug just doesn't seem like a viable option, especially when you play against people who can aim. Grey Talon suffers less from that issue because he starts with more stamina and he mostly builds spirit, so his buffed bow during flight is not that important. Good players mostly use flight as just a movement option in most cases, but especially in late game when you have to go up against enemy gun carriers with items, you just put yourself in a disadvantage when you fly. I wonder if they will ever address that and rework those characters' flight abilities, or will they just keep buffing them so that they can compete with DLC characters. I would also be really curious how they would design a flying character nowadays. In my community hero ideas video I showcased a character who is a flying archetype, but his abilities seemed way more in line with the current speed and movement of the game, so I would love to see them make something similar to that. Warden is an interesting character because for quite some time he was played as a gun carry character, which I found extremely boring compared to his spirit builds. Warden is generally one of the most straightforward characters in Deadlock. His kit is simple to understand and is pretty fun to use. However, when he was meta as a gun late game hyper carry, you were not really interacting with his kit basically at all, and I don't think he was supposed to be a money hungry carry like Venator or Wraith, and many changes across all the recent patches proved to me that Valve wants him to be a frontline character. They nerfed his gun damage quite significantly, they kept buffing spirit parts of his kit like his ultimate and flask, and he has one of the highest HP scalings in the game. Not to mention he has a shield ability that boosts his survivability even more and it scales with spirit. By the way, recently it's been buffed even more. Another kind of similar case is Mirage, a character known to be extremely annoying to play against and who is usually played as a carry. But with their changes to his tornado this spring, it seems to me like Valve wants Mirage to be sort of a frontline character as well, in a way. Usually you play Mirage for his high damage from his marks and you just stand behind your team shooting like a turret with ricochet. But his high mobility and CC on tornado combined with the bullet evasion you get, which is quite significant, it seems to me like they want you to go in there and stay in your enemy's face. Not to mention he also has scarabs that steal HP. I do think they tried to make Mirage more of a brawly character, but it just didn't work. Until this day people kind of just play him as a gun carry who deals crazy damage. Except now he has extremely strong escape option. Summoners are quite interesting in Deadlock. Deadlock. Characters like that existed in other MOBAs too, but I think the reason they are that hated in Deadlock is because you actually have to shoot whatever they summon, meaning you have to aim, which takes much more effort than right-clicking on a summon. Graves is a better example of this. So many people complained about her skulls, even though you can punch them, but it can be an extremely annoying thing to deal with, especially if your mechanics are not that good. Zombies constantly running at you is also a bit frustrating, but as more time went on, a lot of players just figured out how easy it is to deal with Graves' abilities, leaving her behind in meta. She is annoying to play against, but she just doesn't compare to how powerful most other characters are in the game. So what do you do in this situation? You could keep Graves weak forever, because if you don't, players on lower ranks will complain a lot about her, which is fair, but if you leave her in this state, she will never see play on higher levels. So is it a matter of balance or just a design flaw? McGuinness might be an even more interesting subject to talk about. She's almost never meta, but when she is, nobody wants to play the game. McGuinness can become a meta hero for two reasons: one, her turrets, and two, her ult. The thing about McGuinness is that she is easily the most defensive hero in the entire game, and she is the only character who has that identity. No one in the game is built to excel at defending objectives, and it goes against what, in my opinion, devs are trying to promote in Deadlock, which is ending the games faster. The new objective is a great example because it spawns a wave of super minions that are supposed to help you push walkers more effectively, and in general, objectives in Deadlock are not too durable. However, McGuinness does not give a fuck. If you are trying to siege your enemy's base, especially after the base rework, McGuinness is easily the worst hero to go up against, because she just puts up a wall, sets up 20 turrets on high ground and barrages on top of shrines or in the patron pit. She is a menace at defense, and no other character is as good at locking down an area. Maybe you could argue that Graves with Echo Shard and her floor trap could be similar, but she is still number 2 at best. And to me, it's just weird to have a character like McGuinness in the game, which is why I suspect she is one of the characters who will get a complete rework of her kit. I don't want her gone completely, but she is definitely not a very interactive hero to go up against as it is now. And turrets are just boring. I feel like we could come up with a better version of them. Assassin heroes are interesting because they are kind of like pick heroes, except they don't need their team to follow up for a kill. As a result, you get trade-offs. Pick heroes like Moint Holiday have either tankiness or mobility, but assassin characters like Haze or Drifter are either insanely squishy or have little to no mobility, which is a totally fine approach, and it gets out of hand when a character like Haze can press her 4 and annihilate every enemy in a teamfight. Whenever old Haze is meta, it's not fun for anybody. Not for Haze players, not for everyone else. But after Haze received some adjustments recently, I'm actually pretty happy with her place in the meta. The current spirit build on her is very strong, and that's how most people are playing her now, and she's finally fully committing to her role of an assassin, who looks for people overextending or who can get an important pick in the middle of a teamfight. And you could maybe argue that Sleep Dagger Echo Shard is a bit too strong at the moment, but if they decide to nerf her, I just hope they make sure to not kill that playstyle, because her identity is supposed to be exactly what it is now. But I will say that Curse Haze ult is extremely annoying, because it not only blocks all of your abilities, but it also doesn't let you use Metal Skin, which is the best item to counter Haze normally. And Indomitable doesn't even help, since she can just proc it with the Sleeping Dagger first. I ended up talking for more than I expected, but I'm sure there is even more to discuss with all of those characters. So if you have your own opinions on certain heroes' identity, share it in the comments. Like and subscribe if you liked the video, and I will be making another part of community hero ideas soon. So keep that in mind if you've seen previous parts. Bye bye!